Canada is one of the wealthiest countries on Earth, yet there are places inside it where the road simply disappears. Not at a border, not at a checkpoint, just an ending. Pavement thins into gravel, gravel gives way to ice, and then there is nothing at all. Beyond that point there are no permanent, all-season roads. No reliable way in or out. Just distance, cold, and time. That sounds impossible in a country that appears so connected. Canada is a G7 economy, deeply integrated with the United States and global trade networks. Its cities rely on continuous movement, food, fuel. In 2024, 26.8 million road motor vehicles were registered in Canada, up 4.2% from the previous year. More than 9 in 10, 91.6%, were light-duty vehicles, passenger cars, pickups, SUVs, and minivans, while medium and heavy-duty trucks powered supply chains across provinces. Roads are not optional here, they are economic lifelines. And yet vast northern regions of Canada, including much of the Arctic and the Canadian Shield, spanning nearly 40% of the country's landmass, lack permanent all-season road access. This is the contradiction hiding beneath the surface. Canada is built on mobility, but only part of the country is truly reachable. The dense southern corridor near the U.S. border is threaded with highways and logistics hubs. Beyond it, the map empties, not because nothing is there, but because the land itself resists connection. Fly north and the geography changes abruptly. The forests thicken, lakes multiply, soil thins, bedrock pushes closer to the surface, muskeg swallows heavy machinery, permafrost shifts with the seasons, cracking foundations and tearing apart pavement. What looks like open space on a map is, in reality, some of the most hostile terrain on the planet. In these regions, roads are not permanent structures. They are temporary victories. Winter ice roads appear for a few months, then melt away. Aircraft replace highways. Barges replace trucks. Entire communities plan their survival around temperature windows rather than markets. This is not a failure of policy or ambition. Governments have invested, engineers have tried, budgets have grown. The outcome remains unchanged. Because geography does not negotiate. In Canada, resources exist, wealth exists. But access is selective, and in the end, access decides everything. The story of Canada's inaccessible land begins hundreds of millions of years ago, long before humans drew borders or carved highways through the wilderness. To understand why nearly half the country has no permanent roads, we must follow the slow, relentless hand of deep time geology. Canada sits atop some of the oldest rock on Earth. The Canadian Shield, a vast expanse of Precambrian bedrock, stretches over 4 million square kilometers, more than half the country. These rocks formed more than 1 billion years ago, born from tectonic collisions that welded fragments of ancient continents together. Mountains rose and eroded, minerals concentrated in veins, and glaciers scarred the surface clean. Accessibility, not abundance, became the ultimate measure of value. Rich in metals, timber, and lakes, the Shield is a fortress built by time. Its resources are abundant, but extracting them requires a battle with the landscape itself. During the last ice age, massive glaciers several kilometers thick advanced and retreated across the Shield, grinding valleys into bedrock and leaving behind muskeg and thin soil. Lakes filled glacial basins, and rivers carved pathways often unsuitable for road construction. The ice didn't just shape the surface, it determined how humans would interact with it for millennia. Roads require stable ground, bridges demand firm foundations, and the northern soil offers neither. Permafrost in the far north acts like a living puzzle, solid in winter, unstable in summer, always shifting. To build roads here is to gamble against the clock and physics. Meanwhile, the southern regions of Canada were touched differently by glaciation. Glacial deposits created fertile soils along the St. Lawrence and southern Ontario, providing terrain that supports dense urbanization, agriculture, and highway networks. Mineral deposits became centers of mining and industry, but even here, infrastructure followed the contours of what the land could support, not what was desired. Accessibility dictated settlement patterns, which in turn dictated economic power. The story of Canada's forests, rivers, and mineral veins illustrates a fundamental geoeconomic principle: it is not enough for wealth to exist, it must be reachable. A gold vein buried under permafrost or a timber stand trapped behind muskeg is effectively invisible to markets. Modern trucking networks in Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and British Columbia, where roads follow navigable terrain, are a testament to the careful alignment of human ambition with geological reality. By December 2020, Canada supported 232,680 trucking businesses, ranging from small owner-operators to fleet companies, concentrated in provinces where geography allows consistent access. These companies underpin the national economy, yet they operate within a framework determined entirely by the physical landscape. Even the rivers, once vital for transport, obey the same principle. Hydrology dictated where cities would grow, where roads could connect, and where economic activity could flourish. The deep time collisions, glaciers, and slow accumulation of minerals didn't merely shape Canada's land. They preordained the limits of national power. Geography, as always, is destiny. It is this ancient, unyielding geography that explains why roads stop, ice begins, and large swaths of Canada remain permanently out of reach. The past is not gone. It is built into the very foundation of every highway and every inaccessible tundra beyond the urban corridors. Even where roads exist, geography continues to dictate the rules of movement and economic power. Canada's challenges are not only about ice and permafrost, they are about scale, distance, and the invisible cost of being trapped within certain terrains. Coastal regions, river valleys, and fertile plains allow cities to thrive, trucking networks to operate, and trade to flow. But in much of the northern and central Shield, every kilometer of road becomes a disproportionate investment, a choke point for commerce. Canada's landlocked interior carries penalties few outside the country fully grasp. Shipping a ton of goods over water costs a fraction of moving it across hundreds of kilometers of remote gravel roads or temporary winter ice routes. The trucking industry illustrates this divide. In 2019, 25.4 million vehicles were registered in Canada. Around 92% were lighter vehicles, passenger automobiles, pickups, SUVs, minivans. Medium and heavy trucks capable of hauling industrial loads comprised just 4.4%, while buses, motorcycles, and mopeds made up 3.3%. Yet even these vehicles are confined by geography. No matter how many trucks exist, if there is no road, the concentration of trucking companies underscores the geography trap. Of 232,680 businesses in the sector as of December 2020, 72,369 had employees, while 163,11 operated without staff, often small, for hire operators willing to brave the difficult corridors that do exist. Even here, companies cluster in provinces where access is reliable. Ontario accounts for 45.5%, Quebec 17.9%, Alberta 13.8%, and British Columbia 12.3%. Beyond these corridors, economies of scale collapse. A fleet of trucks cannot function if frozen rivers dictate schedules or permafrost shifts foundations. Resource wealth does not guarantee power. Northern Canada holds vast deposits of minerals, timber, and hydrocarbons, but the cost of extracting and transporting them is staggering. The resource curse is geographic as much as economic. Accessibility, not raw abundance, defines opportunity. A mine in northern Quebec might be rich in gold, but without a road capable of supporting heavy trucks year-round, that gold is trapped in the ground, invisible to markets. Coastal regions, by contrast, can export commodities efficiently. Shipping terminals multiply the value of every ton extracted, while inland deposits shrink under the weight of transport costs. Geography also shapes trade dynamics. Sea routes allow Canada to reach Europe, Asia, and the United States at relatively low cost. Overland routes to the interior are expensive, slow, and vulnerable to disruption. The result is a nation where refining and processing often concentrate in accessible areas, leaving extraction sites in remote regions dependent on seasonal access, temporary logistics, or costly air and water transport. The raw resources exist everywhere. National power and wealth consolidate only where roads, rivers, and terrain align. Canada's geography is a trap and a lens simultaneously. It rewards strategic placement and punishes hubris. Governments can invest, policies can shift, but the landscape itself enforces limits. Access determines economic opportunity, and half the country's landmass remains perpetually on the other side of that boundary. Geography, again, proves that it is destiny. Canada's modern infrastructure is a gamble, a bet against distance, climate, and terrain that often costs billions and sometimes fails entirely. In the populated southern corridor, Highways stretch for thousands of kilometers with little resistance. Trucks run continuously, moving goods from Toronto to Vancouver, Montreal to Calgary, keeping the economy humming. But venture north, and the story changes entirely. Each kilometer of road becomes an engineering ordeal, a high-stakes wager against forces that will never negotiate. Permafrost dominates vast swaths of northern Canada. It is not simply frozen soil, it is living, shifting ground. In summer it softens, in winter it contracts. Asphalt cracks, foundations sink, bridges warp. Engineers must design roads not as static infrastructure, but as constantly adapting systems, with drainage, insulation, and flexible foundations built into every meter. Even then, success is never guaranteed. Roads are rebuilt, rerouted, and repaired year after year. The cost of permanence is relentless. The Canadian government and private companies have attempted ambitious escape projects. Multi-billion-dollar highways that thread through Muskie, over lakes, across the Shield, and along rivers that refuse to run straight. Every project tests the limits of logistics, finance, and engineering. Winter ice roads appear, providing temporary relief, only to vanish with the thaw. Air transport and seasonal barges supplement these roads, creating a patchwork network that barely connects communities to essential services. Distance remains the ultimate profit killer. A truckload of timber that can reach Vancouver in 2 days from southern Alberta may take weeks to move from the far north, consuming fuel, labor, and capital in a struggle against the land itself. Even with 232,680 trucking businesses operating in Canada as of December 2020, the majority concentrate in accessible regions: Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and British Columbia, where terrain allows predictable routes. Small for hire carriers and owner-operators brave northern corridors, but the majority of economic activity avoids them entirely. Infrastructure becomes a self-selecting filter, determining which regions prosper and which remain permanently marginal. Hydroelectric projects, mining operations, and pipelines illustrate the same truth. Every dollar invested north of the major urban corridor is a bet on geography, not solely on markets. Engineers and planners work to defy the landscape, but nature has the final say. A road can be built, a bridge can rise, a port can anchor, but the terrain imposes limits, costs escalate, timelines stretch, and risk multiplies. Canada's infrastructure is therefore more than a network of highways and railways. It is a series of gambles, each one measured against the immutable reality of terrain and climate. Governments may change, budgets may rise, and technology may advance. Yet the harshest lessons of all come not from policy or ambition, but from the land itself. In Canada, to build is to negotiate with geography. And in this game, the land almost always holds the winning hand. Canada's geographic challenges are not just domestic, they shape its role on the global stage. The vast northern expanse, the rugged Shield, the frozen tundra, and the seasonal rivers are more than obstacles, they are strategic frontiers. Sovereignty in these regions is proven not by treaties or declarations, but by action: the ability to deliver goods, maintain communication, and sustain communities where no permanent roads exist. Control over territory in Canada's case is inseparable from access. This geographic reality also dictates vulnerabilities. Northern communities rely on winter ice roads, aircraft, and seasonal barges to receive supplies. A single disruption, an early thaw, an extended freeze, or extreme storms can isolate towns for weeks. For the Canadian government, this is not an abstract problem, it is a constant operational concern. In the remote north, sovereignty is maintained not by presence alone, but by logistical capacity, the ability to move men, materials, and information through the most hostile terrain on the continent. The strategic stakes extend to natural resources. Vast mineral deposits, hydrocarbon reserves, and freshwater are concentrated in regions where permanent roads are sparse or non-existent. Competitors may covet these resources, but extracting them demands that Canada overcome its own geography first. Supply chains are seasonal, transport expensive, and infrastructure vulnerable. A single miscalculation could turn a resource-rich region into an economic liability. Imagine a nightmare scenario: a critical mining operation dependent on winter roads is cut off by an unseasonal thaw. Essential equipment cannot arrive, output halts, export commitments are missed, prices rise, investors panic, and remote communities face shortages. Geography has enforced its dominance. exposing a vulnerability that political will alone cannot erase. Even in more populated provinces, geography sets the limits of expansion. Trucking networks, 232 6080 businesses strong as of December 2020, cluster in Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and British Columbia where roads and terrain align. Beyond those corridors, economic activity thins and strategic depth diminishes. Canada's northern borders, rivers, and inland waterways are not lines on a map. They are dynamic frontiers where access defines power and isolation magnifies risk. In this context, Canadian policymakers and businesses constantly balance opportunity and exposure. Each investment in roads, pipelines, or transport is also a calculated response to geography's constraints. National security, economic growth, and community survival all hinge on mastering, rather than ignoring, the landscape. Geography once again proves it is destiny, and the most remote, roadless corners of Canada remain both its greatest asset and its most persistent vulnerability. The future of Canada's roadless regions will be shaped not just by policy, but by climate and technology. Warming temperatures are thawing permafrost, altering rivers, and shifting the very foundations on which roads might be built. Drones, autonomous vehicles, and modular transport systems promise new ways to bridge distance, yet they cannot erase the immutable contours of the land. Geography remains the ultimate arbiter. No matter the advances in engineering, no matter how many trucks or fleets are added, half of Canada's terrain will continue to dictate the terms of access and power. Roads can be repaired, aircraft can deliver, and barges can navigate rivers. But the walls of Muskeg ice and shield rock endure. In Canada, as in all nations, wealth and ambition bend to the landscape, not the other way around. The land does not negotiate. It waits, patient and indifferent, shaping the possibilities of every generation. And as the ice recedes and rivers swell, a question emerges. Which of the world's great northern frontiers will yield to human ambition? And which will remain beyond the reach of roads, forever reminding us that geography writes the final chapter?